Greetings, fellow freethinkers. The event you're about to watch was hosted by the Center for Inquiry, an educational and outreach organization dedicated to defending and promoting science, reason, secularism, and free inquiry in every area of human endeavor. My name is Justin Trottier, and as Executive Director of CFI Canada, I would like to take a moment to tell you a bit about us. CFI Canada currently incorporates CFI Communities for Inquiry in Calgary, Montreal, and Vancouver. Over 30 affiliated student organizations from coast to coast, and of course our headquarters here at the Center for Inquiry, Ontario. CFI Ontario, located in the heart of downtown Toronto, is the first Canadian branch of CFI, and is the first dedicated event and meeting space for all humanists, skeptics, and freethinkers in the nation. Our mandate encompasses a robust public education series, campus outreach to a growing network of student freethought groups, community outreach and social services, to provide secular and humanist alternatives to religiously monopolized services and activities, and a lending library and media center that, among other things, broadcasts videos like this across the planet. To learn more, please visit us at www.cfiontario.org, to get on our email list, or to learn how you can support our movement, such as by becoming a friend of the Center, a CFI donor, a volunteer, or to launch or affiliate a new campus or local group. Contact us today at ontario@centerforinquiry.net. That's CENTER. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the video. Okay, thanks everybody for joining us on this lifelong evening. The Center for Inquiry is more than anything else, as you may have surmised, an educational institute. So we're very happy to have a professor of education with us today. Dr. John M. Novak is professor of education at Brock University, St. Catharines, Ontario. He's been an invited keynote speaker on 6 continents, many of which I think he visited very recently, as I hear, having addressed educational audiences from north of the Arctic Circle to the bottom of New Zealand. His books and monographs, authored, co-authored, and edited, include Fundamentals of Invitational Education, Creating Inviting Schools, Inviting Educational Leadership, which I have in my hand, perhaps we'll pass it around later, Democratic Teacher Education, and Inviting Educational Technology. He's written articles for Free Inquiry magazine, many of which are on display at the back, and spoken to international, national, and local humanist groups. Presently, he is past president of the Society of Professors of Education. It's a great honor to welcome John Novak.
Thank you, Justin. Can you hear me without this? I'll just sort of keep this around, but not too close. It's really very, very nice being here. I'm not sure Justin told you the whole story, though, of how I got here. Several months ago, I received an email from Justin that says, Dr. Novak, we need a dynamic, articulate, intelligent speaker. I said, my goodness, this fellow knows a lot about self-concept, a lot about inviting people. And then the note said, do you know anybody? Couldn't come up with anybody, so I said, why don't you talk to the group? Now, I must say, in terms of my speaking style, Tom Flynn has described my speaking style as PMS, which stood for Philosophical Motivational Stand-Up. I like to think that I do EIO, Educationally Inviting Oratory. So you'll hear a little bit about that. But it's a pleasure being here. It's a Friday night, and I appreciate that people have come on a Friday night. How many people had to pay money tonight to listen to me speak? All of my life, I've been a good-for-nothing speaker. This is the first time that people have actually had to pay money on the spot to hear me speak. So I feel very, very honored that you have come in and then spent your money. When I talk about things, I'm an educator, and my goal as I talk about things is to have these kind of experiences. So it's about trying to have aha experiences. What I have found in teaching, especially about issues that are so close, so important, so personal, you can get to the aha by way of the ha-ha. So I will try to use humor, at least some, I think, unusual ways of looking at things, because these are important issues to us. These are close issues, and I find that I can, rather than looking directly at the sun, if I sort of get at some things with humor, I can, I think, deal with the subtlety and nuances of key points. But it's my pleasure being here. My talk today will be called Appreciating the Human Perspective. I wrote an article that came out a year ago in Free Inquiry. Other people hold up their books when they come speak here. I go, this is my article, 2 pages. It took a lot of effort to condense my thoughts into 2 pages, what I'll try to do now is to take these 2 pages and make them last about 40 minutes as I talk about the ideas of appreciating the human perspective. But in some ways, my thought was a reaction to a statement made by a philosopher named Richard Rorty, who talked about the difference between a theological perspective and a non-theological perspective. And Rorty's point was the non-theologian's theological perspective tends to look at the theological and says, they just lack courage. The theological position tends to look at the non-theologians and say, they lack appreciation. What I'm trying to say is, you need both. You need courage and appreciation to be able to live in the world in a meaningful way. I will share an idea that I received from my daughter 18 years ago. And it, I think, represents the perspective that I'm going to come to. And it deals with this. When she was 11 years old, we were skiing at Kissing Bridge. Anybody been to Kissing Bridge? South of the border, you go to Kissing Bridge there. They have this old 2-person lift. And I was going up with Natalie. She was 11 years old, and we used to talk philosophy. And I said, Natalie, do you realize that all of the universe has led up to where we are now, and what we do now will affect the rest of the universe? We used to have philosophical conversations from the time she was about 4. Her response, I thought, was perfect. Very good philosophical response. It began with this. Silence. Followed by perhaps. Followed by the phrase, I can see where it might matter, but if we all get sucked up into a black hole, it won't matter with what we're doing now. Upon which I went, silence, perhaps, but it matters now. So I guess my talk will be appreciating, but it matters now. What I'm going to try to do in this talk is go from the simple to the complex to the simple beyond the complex. So as I work through ideas. As an educator, I like to work on some basic points, start with those, run into some obstacles, and then show ways to overcome those obstacles with the type of thinking that I introduced. I'm going to be talking about a certain type of humanism. Oh, actually, my daughter pointed out to me, we had just finished a trip around the world. And I mentioned to my daughter that I was one of the speakers for the Voices of Reason. You ever want to hear your child laugh, let her know that her parent is speaking as one of the Voices of Reason. And she says, really? And I realized in terms of Voices of Reason, you're going to hear 2 voices from me. I'm a Canadian and an American. I have lived half of my life in the United States and half of my life in Canada. We're almost right now exactly at the balance point. And I think of that famous statement that I read on a bathroom wall one time that said, roses are red, violets are blue, I'm schizophrenic, and so am I. So I am Canadian and American, and I think I speak in terms of a Canadian-American perspective. 2 years ago, I got to speak at an educational conference on Canadian and U.S. approaches to education. And I gave the first half of the talk as an American. So, rah, rah, this is great, this is wonderful. And the second part is Canadian. Well, you know, it's really not that easy, and you know, we really have to be careful. So I find myself in both perspectives. In fact, when I go over the border, they'll ask me my citizenship. And I'll go, USA? And they're still giving some thought to that. But I think right now I'm a very, very proud Canadian. In fact, when we bring family members to Toronto, I've developed Canadian smartness. My family will say, how is the crime? And I'll say, it's illegal. And I really do have this belief, even here in Toronto the Good, that if somebody came up with a gun and said, this is a stick-up, that I could look at them and say, this is Canada. We don't do that here. And they would stop. This is my belief and my Canadian notion. I'm going to come from a Canadian and U.S. approach, as I'm going to talk about this appreciative spirit. I come from a tradition called pragmatism. I've been strongly influenced by a fellow named John Dewey. Triple dipped in John Dewey. I've been on the executive of the John Dewey Society. I like the thought of Dewey. William James said something interesting about Dewey, though. He said his writing style wasn't damnable, it was goddamnable. But he also said he may not have said it well, but he had it to say. And Oliver Wendell Holmes said about Dewey that it's like God was incoherent but trying to tell you what the universe was like from the inside out. And I really admire that in doing, because you can see as you read his writing that he's thinking through the nature of what the world would be like if this pragmatic perspective were valid. In terms of my pragmatism, I came here in 1975 to Canada. Somebody said to me something interesting one time. They said, the draft was over then. Upon which I say, it was? But the draft was over in 75. I came from the University of Florida to Brock University. Anybody been to Brock? Just on the, down the road a piece. Named after Isaac Brock, great hero of the War of 1812. But I won't tell you that story now. But just came to Canada in August, went to the Canadian National Exhibition. New American coming to Canada. There was a booth there that was the Canadian Liberation Front.